Hey Michelle, I'm going to go through recording a short piece here for you as an example and to help you along as you go into recording your own pieces. The piece I've chosen is one that's very familiar to me. It's Prelude Number 4 by Frank Wallace. It's one page, so it's very short. You'll be able to hear some of the repetitions, and I'll try to point out what I'm doing when I go back and try to fix some stuff up. But first, I'm going to go through and just play it as it is. Haven't practiced this recently. This is essentially where I'm at right now with the piece. So let's hear that. Obvious mistakes throughout there, and probably the first thing that I would do, even though I have tuned up, is I would check my tuning again, probably several times throughout the recording process, because it could slightly go out of tune, and if I can hear it, definitely I want to check it. But even if I can't hear it, between takes, it's not a bad idea to just check over, and right away, my E is out of tune, just slightly. So not super far out of tune, but for recording, you don't want to be out of tune at all if you can help it. If it's within your power to change that and fix it up, go ahead and do that. And now that it's in better tune, I can talk about some of the first places I need to look at. The first section felt pretty smooth, felt okay. I can go back to look at that more when I really want to get into not fixing mistakes, but changing interpretation, maybe possibly slowing down, speeding up certain sections, changing where I place my right hand for attacking, whether I use free stroke, rest stroke, all sorts of the more interpretation type of questions that you can approach there. But in the middle section there, if you were listening, there were some obvious mistakes, either notes that I forgot to hit, rhythms that got sloppy, or notes that I played with my left hand not well enough to make them clear. So the next thing I would do is just go back to that middle section, play through it a couple times, and if I find in particular a measure or even part of a measure that's still throwing me off, I will slow down and just practice that for a few times. And I know from learning this piece that one of the things that was really difficult for me was this measure that happens at the end of the first section and at the end of the whole piece. If you can see that on the camera, it could be this shape right here, except I need to get a finger down to here in the middle of the phrase. So I have to do this slightly awkward position like this, and I can't mute the top string, so I can't let that pinky slide out of the way. It's a very uncomfortable position, and I have to get to it quickly. So that's a place I'm going to sit down and practice that for a little while. So I'm going to come into it from the previous measure. So the tricky part for me there is getting that, and cleanly going to that note, without losing any other notes in the position, because these lower notes need to be ringing out. You hear a little buzz right there. Little buzz again. And then that was finally clean, but it was 1 take out of 3. So for recording, if I'm only making it through a section 1 out of 3 times, or even 1 out of 2 times, that's not really that great. Then you're probably going to be throwing away 30% or half of your recordings just because of one measure that you're not happy with at the end. So I want to practice this section until I can get through it cleanly almost every time, maybe 8 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10. Ideally 10 times out of 10, but that's not always possible in certain sections. So especially for just a simpler, shorter example of recording, I'm just going to do this a few more times here, and let's move on from that. And again, I wasn't happy with that. The last note did not come in cleanly. I had to refine that finger. So again, we'll call that a strike. Strike on the high E, getting muffled. Again, you can hear that buzz. Finger's not in the right place. Passable. Could be better, but I'll call that a success. Buzz, call that a strike again. Calling that a strike for a little buzz at the very end of that. Success. So you can see the idea here. This is going to take, for me, it's going to take quite a while to get that measure clean. It happens twice. It's the last measure before the final chord. So it's pretty important. It's not somewhere in the middle that's going to be easily forgotten. This is one of the things that will make that ending stick and last. Or it's going to just tarnish that whole finish that's been building up. So I'm just going to play that measure over just a few times here. And I'm not going to sit on it too long here for this example. If I was doing this just for myself, I would sit on this for a long time to make sure it's right. Now, most of those were clean, aside from that one that I just missed the last note. But I'm able to sit on there, and I'm not changing into that chord. So changing into that chord adds some difficulty to it. And there's that buzz again. If I was going to spend more time on this, I could probably get that cleaner, but we'll leave that as a very, very bad rendition for now. To keep this video a little bit shorter, that is a spot that I should go back to, and I should spend more time, probably like a full half an hour, just trying to get that super, super clean from the measure before. Fortunately, the measure afterwards goes right into open strings at the beginning, so I'm not worried about that transition. Although I don't want to have that squeak on the release. So I'd say that measure, as far as this example video goes, I'm going to leave that one alone. Could use more practice. But let's look at the other places. Let's go through this middle section one more time and see if there's anything that was a one-time fluke from not seeing it for a while, or if there's some stuff like the other measure that I'm just going to need to practice a few more times. So here's the middle section. Okay, I'm going to stop right there because that was a measure I messed up the first time, and I messed it up again that time. And I think it was more left hand not releasing one of the notes. So it should be... And I just... That last B didn't come out there. It stayed as the previous notes. And I don't think this one is a difficult position to get into, so I'm not going to worry too much about transitioning from the previous measure into this one. It's kind of a standalone. I get to release everything and just go to a C from a B. Not a difficult switch, so I'm not worried about that. I'm not going to transition back and forth. It's also not hard to get into the next one. The next measure starts with an open A, and this finger is still on the same note from the previous measure. So again, transition before and after, not a problem here. The problem was in the measure itself, almost kind of getting tangled among my fingers of which way to go and stuff. Breaks a little bit of the pattern that has been going through. And after playing through it a few times, I'm not too worried about it. There is a question of whether I should be playing two of those notes with my thumb or with my fingers, but that's not a mistake question. That's more of a interpretation question for later. Continuing on, there's two more measures in the middle section to examine to see if there's any mistakes. And there's similar to that measure I talked about at the very beginning there, practicing over and over again. This one's slightly different, a little bit easier. I don't have to worry about that open high E string, so it actually makes this very easy to play cleanly. Slightly odd transition into the it's really the A part again. So the whole song is an A part, a B part, an A part. Coming back into the A part there, it is a slightly odd switch from what I was, which is more of like this kind of position into sort of this position. So I'm going to try that a few times, see how that feels. Not the cleanest thing, but not too bad. So I am sacrificing the low note there a little bit early, letting go of it while that measure is still happening to make a smoother switch over, because I need that same finger on the bass to go to the next bass. So I think that's all the places that I was making mistakes at. I'll check the very last four measures here before the ending measure, just to double check those, because sometimes that gave me a hard time as I was learning it. And I got that difficult measure clean there at the end, which is good. Feel a little bit more comfortable with it since I've spent some time practicing it. I feel like the mistakes have been addressed to a small degree. I should spend more time on this measure. And you can just hear right there why. It's not clean, it sounds a little ugly. I might get through it and play it cleanly on a recording, but it's just as likely that I will pinch one of the strings, mute one of the strings, buzz, dulled notes. So that would be the place that I should go back, not recording, just practice that measure, practice coming into it from the previous measure, because as you saw, I can play it fine if I'm just repeating from this shape. But coming into it from the previous one, I get one chance to lock my fingers into that correct position. and if I don't get it right, then something goes wrong in the measure. The mistakes are addressed. If I was having trouble anywhere, or I was unsure if I was playing something correctly, either right hand finger pattern or left hand positioning, I would go back and double check slowly through those measures that I'm playing the right notes, because maybe I learned it wrong and it's a C instead of a C sharp, or maybe it's supposed to be a ring finger there instead of pinky, or something like that. So for instance, one thing here that actually was changed by my instructor as I was learning through this was that difficult measure for me originally was written as 1, 2, 4 on left-hand fingers, index, middle, pinky, but that doesn't give you any finger to do this first fret C with. So that was changed to 2, 3, 4, middle ring pinky, leaving the index finger open to go to that C. So even though originally it was written that way, it's discovered as I was practicing through it and he was working with me that that's not really the best fingering there. So even the authors may not have the best fingering when they first write it. So you might want to look through and decide, is the fingering that I'm using, the pattern on the right hand, is all of that the ideal way to play through this section, or should I try to figure out something else? If I was playing what was originally written there and my instructor hadn't told me what to change, I have to lose the bass note to get that C, which might be an acceptable sacrifice. Or I might decide I could play this with a different finger position here and keep that bass going while that C happens. As you're recording through, you're going to hear fluctuations in your timing. Maybe you'll go faster in some sections and slower in others, intentionally or unintentionally. So as you're recording, listen back and decide, is that what I want? Do I want to slow down here? So I intentionally make a decision on this, or an interpretation decision on this, to slow down at the end of the A part going into the B part. So that sounds like this. But as written, there's no markings to slow down there. So as written, I should continue at the same speed all the way into the B part. So I enjoy the sound of it slowing down there into the B part. Some people might think that that's a little bit too much, that it's just too much of a pull there and it's just distracting from the piece. So that's something you have to decide, what things you like, the way that you like the piece. And it's a good idea to hear other people play a piece so you can hear other interpretations. And sometimes you'd be like, wow, that person played that section so fast, or the whole song so fast, or wow, that person played that song so slow, or the things that they do, they change the tempos throughout. In this piece, I'm going to be fairly consistent, or try to be fairly consistent with my tempo, aside from a few of those places that are the end of the A or even the end of the B. And the end of the whole piece, I will definitely slow down. To me, that's the interpretation that I like. It's totally valid to also just keep it at tempo. That doesn't fit for me as well, so I'm going to choose to do that. Deciding on volume changes, overall volume of the two different voices here, or really the three different voices. there's the bass voice. And I'm choosing to play that with my thumb to give that a slightly distinct sound from the sound my fingers will make so that it will stand out a little bit. There is a droning, repeating note in almost every measure. So I'm trying to play that drone a little louder right there to highlight it, but I don't want to do that when I actually play it. I actually want to do the opposite. I want to let the drone sit a little bit lower in volume than the bass and the third voice, which is so it's this up, up, up. It's just up above everything the whole way through. And so for that one, I'm actually going to give it a little bit more of a punchy sound with my fingers. And so by doing that, the drone does not sound the same as that third voice as the melody voice. And what you end up getting is sounds like three distinct things happening at once. The thumb doing the bass. In this case, because of the alternating pattern, it's usually my index finger that is playing the droning note. Makes it a little bit easier for me to control how that one sounds. And then getting it a little bit punchier by doing a rest stroke. But there's drawbacks to that. If I do rest stroke, then I kill that drone in between. So then, well, can I make that third voice sound different without cutting off the drone note? Can I do it with a free stroke, not touching the other string? So let me experiment with that a little bit. The bass is pretty much all set because the thumb here can do a rest stroke. And it's the thumb. The thumb's going to sound different from the other fingers, just different shape, different movement. Anyway, so the bass is kind of all set to go. It's that difference between the droning note and the melody. So even though I am using these two fingers for the drone and the melody, the drone I am playing at much subtler, softer style. Even though it's free stroke, I'm just not giving as much pressure into that pluck. And then when I'm playing the melody, I'm really playing that harder, a little more aggressive, a little more pop at the release. And you can hear a difference between those two notes. And instead of just sounding, it could sound just like this. And I don't think that's what's trying to happen here in this piece. So again, this is the interpretation I'm going for, partly based off of what my instructor told me about this piece, that those melody notes are supposed to stand out separately. And in fact, even in the text right here, it says the melody occurring on beats 2, 3, and 4 should be brought out above the rest of the accompaniment. So he's saying, the author is saying, this is the way I wrote it, and so I'm going to go with that interpretation. As far as other things of interpretation, the choice of tone with your right hand especially. Am I going to play way up here? And let me play just the first few measures in one extreme and then the other. So there is the very, very above the whole dark sound. Versus the very, very bright, right close to the bridge sound. or a more middle of the road right behind the sound hole. I think in most pieces you won't sit in just one place the whole time, but that's still something you have to decide as part of your interpretive work. What do you do with the tone? And it might be that you change it throughout even each measure. Could be something as simple as like... or the inverse of that. And there's that measure again. So it could be something like you choose a tone for the bass, again, to help separate those different voices. Maybe the bass is played very brightly, very close to the bridge, and maybe the melody is closer to the sound hole or above the sound hole, or maybe more in the middle. So listen to the comparison between those two. So I'll play everything middle here, and then I will play it once where the bass is by the bridge and the melody is by the middle. So here's everything in the middle. Not clean. And here is with a different tone for the bass by going brighter. Let's try that again. That was just poor. So again, it definitely separates out the voices a little bit more, gives a bit more bright sound to that bass, which, because it sounds brighter and the rest of it sounds a little bit darker, is just gonna sound more unique. So going through deciding what I want to do with like tempo, we've talked about that a little bit. I want to try to keep the tempo pretty even throughout, aside from those few key points that I want to slow down a little bit going into the next section or going into the end. The choice of finger position, finger patterns. Are you playing it as written, first of all? And then after you've played as written, going through and deciding, is that actually the best? Is that what I want to use? Do I trust the author well enough to do that? And then also the choice of tone in your right hand. On some pieces, this piece does not have a repeat, but on some pieces that have a repeat, your choice of do you repeat or not? Do you just go through, ignore repeats? Do you play each repeat once, or how many times do you repeat? So all those things, I think, are the most important ones. And then lastly, just to listen to your recordings. Once you get a recording that you feel is fairly decent, then you want to sit down, listen to it. If you think it's pretty good, give it some time, go away for a while, come back, listen to it again with more of a fresh listen. Once you've been playing for so long and listening to it for so long, you just know what's coming up so well that it's hard to actually hear it like you're hearing it for the first time. But trying to listen for either unwanted, muffled, straight up totally muffled notes, so they're just dead, muffled slightly, so you get that very unpleasant buzzing sound, notes that aren't cleanly fretted, you get your finger just not in the right place, getting fret buzz, because this finger is too far away from the fret, and so the string is actually vibrating against that fret. Listening for some of those unwanted sounds. And another one that we haven't looked at too much, but the squeak. I'm not sure how much that's coming in, but if you are shifting around a lot, you have to deal with the fact that depending on how you lift up your fingers, you might make some squeaky sounds as you let go. And sometimes if you like roll your fingers a little bit as you're coming off, or coming off straighter, or adjusting your pressure as you're about to loosen that finger, all those things can make that go away. But once you start hearing the squeak, if you are making the squeak, you will be hard pressed to forget it, and it's going to really annoy you until you can get rid of it. So I think that's enough explaining about how I practice this piece. So let me try to put it together one last time with some of the decisions that we've gone over. I like the idea of the thumb a little bit brighter than the melody, but it's going to make it harder for me because that's not how I've practiced it. So again, I should have practiced this more, but let's go through just one last recording, and not going to restart or anything like that, and we're going to hear just what comes out. Hopefully it's good, and hopefully it is what I wanted it to be. If it wasn't, I should go back and do it some more, but for the sake of this video already being too long, here's my my last attempt at this.